Katie, if you want to hit record, thank you. All righty. So good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for our kickoff meeting for upcoming improvements to Devonshire Park. Mecklenburg County Park and Recreation staff are excited to begin the process of working with you and your neighbors to identify improvements to the park that reflect your needs. Ultimately, we want to ensure that this park is a vital and loved part of the neighborhood. My name is Bert Lynn. I'm the Capital Planning Division Director for Park and Recreation. Joining me tonight are several folks from my team in Capital Planning, the planner who will be overseeing this project, Darnika Waters, who you will hear from a little bit later, senior planners, Katie Lloyd and Kevin Brickman, our Deputy Director for Park and Recreation, Peter Cook, and from our sister agency, Mecklenburg County Asset and Facility Management, David Booth, who will be serving as the project manager for the project. We wanted to hold this initial meeting at the park, but with the COVID and the Omicron variant and the impending winter weather, we went ahead and decided to do this virtually now, with a hope that we can host something within the park within the next month or so. So we will reach out to you using the information that you shared when you registered for the meeting to let you know of anything as it comes up. Next slide, please. Thank you. So during tonight's meeting, we wanted to discuss how the park was funded and share some context and history of Devonshire Park. Most importantly, we want to hear from you. So we've got a series of questions and some discussion items that we'll share. It'll give you a chance to help direct us in how we improve the park. We'll wrap up today's meeting with an overview of the project schedule, and then we've got our contact information at the end as well. Next slide, please. So before we get started, I wanted to walk you through some of the features of our virtual meeting platform. We're using Zoom tonight. It's important that everyone stays muted throughout the presentation. You'll notice the button to the bottom left of your screen, shaped like a microphone. If it has a red slash through it, then you are muted. If you have any questions or comments throughout the presentation, please use the chat function. There's a button on the bottom of your screen that brings up the chat box there. Later in the presentation, we'll give everybody an opportunity to unmute and share your thoughts or ask us questions, and you can ask questions kind of as we go along within the presentation as well. So let's test the chat feature very quickly. Please use the chat feature to let us know your name, your zip code, and your favorite outdoor activity. Some coming in. Yeah. Walking and hiking, hiking and bicycle riding. I like that. And we've got bike lanes adjacent to this park, which is a great amenity. Hello, Jean. Bikers and walkers, I like it. Walking and general exercise, very good. All right, so I think we've got the hang of that. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Walking, playing with the grandkids. Very good. Okay, thanks, y'all. So over the last 2 years, the Board of County Commissioners set aside a total of $7 million as part of a broader equity initiative to use for reinvestment in park and recreation facilities. The funds that we'll use to improve Devonshire Park are part of that overall funding. We've recently completed our new Park and Recreation Master Plan Playbook. One component of the plan was a full inventory and assessment of all of our parks, greenways, nature preserves, recreation centers, and other department facilities. Next slide. So we completed this inventory and assessment of over 250 Mecklenburg County Park and Recreation amenities. The assessment provides us with a snapshot of the current conditions of each facility. This assessment will be updated on a regular basis, and over time, it will serve as a tool for benchmarking progress and prioritizing investment and reinvestment in our facilities. This process will help us with an improved method of accountability by getting eyes on all of our parks and other facilities on a regular basis. Next slide. So what you see here are the assessment grades of all of our small local neighborhood parks. These results were compiled following the inventory and assessment and summarized on a master spreadsheet. This shows a summary, like I said, of our neighborhood and local parks. And you can see that Devonshire Park received an F grade due to older out-of-date amenities that included the playground and the shelter. Now, this assessment was actually done a little, just under 2 years ago. So since the assessment was completed, Park and Recreation have replaced the playground equipment, and we removed the older shelter that was kind of tucked in the woods on the back side of the park. That was actually just on the school's side of our property line there. So the lower grade for Devonshire Park made it a great candidate for additional investments now. This same system will be used to prioritize future investments in existing facilities. So when we did this study, we found that a number of our larger community and regional parks have been fairly well maintained. But as you can see, a lot of our neighborhood parks skew toward kind of the acceptable down to the poor rating range. And so as we move forward through this process and moving into our capital improvement plan over the next 6 to 7 years, we anticipate a lot more reinvestment in our neighborhood parks that folks like you would be able to walk to and enjoy. Next slide. We just wanted to show very quickly on the map the other parks that are included within our equity projects initiative. You can see Devonshire Park, nearby Viewmont Park is one that will be kicking off a little bit later this year. Plans are already underway at Albemarle Road Park and Enderley Park. We recently had our public meetings in November and December for Tryon Hills Park and LC Coleman. And so we'll be working on the remainder of these facilities and kicking them off kind of throughout the winter and spring. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide. And I will turn things over to, I think, Katie Lloyd.
Thanks, Bert. So throughout the presentation, we'll have opportunities to ask some poll questions and ask some open-ended questions for discussion as well. But just to get an idea for who's on the call, we're curious, have you ever been to Devonshire Park? It looks like of the people that have attended, all but one person has attended the park or has visited the park. So thanks for sharing that, and I'll share that with you real quick. All right, over to you.
All right, so now we're going to go through some a little bit of history within the park, and Darnika Waters is going to take us through this.
All right, hello everyone. Thanks again for joining us. This is just a brief snapshot. These next few slides are just a brief snapshot of Devonshire Park before it was Devonshire Park. And we're trying to show just the surrounding context before the land was part of Mecklenburg County Park and Rec. In 1938, the area is very rural with a lot of farmland. The road network is not complex, but you can see the alignments for what is now the plaza here on the left with this hard right going north, and on the right, you can see what is now W.T. Harris. In 1951, more rooftops have appeared in the area around those aforementioned major roads. As you can see, Devonshire, which was not conveyed to us until 1966 from a developer, has not yet been formed. In 1978, this is more reminiscent of today's current footprint, but you can see that the road network is more developed, and Devonshire Elementary and Cochrane Collegiate Academy are now present. All right. Currently, Devonshire Park is around 1.7 acres and includes play equipment, paved and unpaved trails, and formal and informal seating. The park is located off Barrington Drive, fairly close to Devonshire Elementary. And here's just a picture taken off of Barrington of the latest play equipment that Bert mentioned was placed into 2021. We have the younger kids play equipment on the left amongst the pine trees, and kind of center stage we have kind of the older elementary group play equipment with swings behind them, behind that play equipment. And the informal and formal seating that I mentioned, you can see the benches by the kind of top play equipment and the boulders which run adjacent to Barrington. We've observed folks, parents in particular, sitting on these in observance of their children on the play equipment. Now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Katie Lloyd, for another poll.
Thanks, Arnika. Okay, so most of you have been to the park. We also were curious, how often do you visit the park today? Is it daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, or for that one person, perhaps never? Just to get an idea of how much the park is currently in your routine. I think that's most of the people that have responded, so I'll go ahead and share that back to you. So not a lot of daily or weekly users, but monthly and yearly users. So you're going kind of periodically, not every day. Some of the things we may be asking about or discussing tonight is what types of amenities in the park would get you there more often or would draw you there. So stop sharing that. Next slide, Darnika. So up next, and this was a question I think some of you have already answered on the public input page, but we want to know, what is one thing you would add to Devonshire Park if you could? That could be whatever you can think of that would kind of, as I mentioned, get you there more often or be something useful to you within the park. And this is where we can, it's a pretty small group tonight. So if you want to unmute or type into the chat, we'll kind of document what you're telling us. Okay, I'm seeing in the chat a basketball court, a dog park. I'm trying to catch up. Dog park, more land
for the park. Yes. And that's something we can talk with CMS about. I mean, luckily we do border CMS property here, and we have a good working relationship with the school system and some shared facilities on some of our in some of our other parks and recreation centers.
Thomas, I know we said one thing, but if what would you want to do in that extra land in the park?
that might be where Sandra's dog park is.
All right. There's a walking path in the back of the park, but it appears to go to the school property.
Mhm.
It's hard to tell. So maybe we need more formal walking paths,
Yeah,
and signage maybe.
that would make sense. I believe a lot of our responses in terms of favorite outdoor activities, there was a lot of walking. And Thomas just mentioned walking path. Devonshire is a really small park. And so if we wanted to do a walking path, it seems like we would need to go and potentially encroach a little bit on the CMS property there. So that is definitely a question that we can ask of our colleagues at CMS.
Ways to keep the cars out of the
Ah,
park.
there we go. Okay.
That's a good one. And Jean didn't know about the current walking path back there. And so any kind of signage, I think would definitely help to know what's park, what's not, what's available.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
All right, I think we'll have more opportunity for discussion next. All right, I saved that, so I'll go ahead and clear it. Next slide, Darnika. So we pulled a couple images of things that we've kind of heard in conversation from staff prior to this meeting about that could potentially be out there. The idea of replacing the park shelter that was recently removed, adding some additional seating of different types. We just showed an example of a bench that is our standard bench across the system, or potentially some fitness equipment, so it could serve users of different ages. So just to give you an idea of some elements from other park spaces in the county. Next slide, Darnika. So with those examples, and definitely use the other here, we just wanted to kind of get an idea of like, if it were those three things, and I might add, let me see if I can edit the poll real quick. Oh, no, I can't do it. So I may go ahead and I'll relaunch it. All right, so I'll go ahead and launch this, and feel free to use the other with thinking of some of the things that you just shared. And we can continue kind of that conversation in the chat. So if we were to add one of those things that we mentioned, which of those things would you be interested in as well? All right, I think we might have a couple more voting.
And I think from the chat, which we'll be able to save after the meeting, walking path or a walking loop was pretty loud and clear there as well.
So of those elements that we mentioned, the shelter, seating, and then fitness equipment being the third tier of that, if we were to prioritize those things based on the people on the call tonight. All right, next slide, Darnika. So based on what you've already shared with us, what maybe you've shared on public input or just questions you may have, this is a chance to unmute or type into the chat any questions or comments that you may have. And Thomas, it looks like there's a creek running along the side of the park, which could complement the park if cleared and cleaned. Darnika and I were just talking about that before the call started. How when you're in the park, you don't really know that creek's back there. Wayne said the creek definitely needs to be clean. Are there any neighborhood groups that we should reach out to? Or are there any kind of volunteer groups in the area that tend to do projects like that we could partner with to keep the creek clean? Oh, nice. Thanks. So the Pittsburgh Steelers fan club cleans Barrington from time to time. Is there one of the Keep Charlotte Beautiful signs out there?
Yes, yeah, there's a sign there. Yeah, and I saw mention of if we clear it out, it might invite more trash. Well, one thing we could do if we go in and take a lot of the brush and overgrowth out of there, then it would be easier for our park staff and park rangers when they come and check on the park and empty trash cans, to also see those areas and clean those areas as well, making sure that the park's nice and tidy.
I had a question from staff here. Someone mentioned the cars coming into the park. If you could provide a little more information about, where they're parking, how they're getting in, or anything else you may observe out at the park site. We have some of the boulders. I'm trying to remember the entrance. There are some boulders along parts of it, but I can't recall if that's across the entire thing.
There's boulders along parts of it. There's trees by the smaller play equipment. But if you're facing the park to the right of the boulders, it's flat and there's actually kind of a gravel area up there. And so they're coming around the boulders from what Sandra said.
Yes, yeah, they just, squeeze in there, park, however, just come all up on the sidewalk. I've been seeing it for years.
Okay, all right. We appreciate you letting us know about that. And this is not the first time we've heard about that in one of our parks. We've got a few different measures that we can use to go and stop that. Additional boulders, we can do bollards. We've got different types of fencing we might be able to use, or do some additional tree planting in that area along with some fencing, so that as those trees are smaller, the fencing keeps folks out. And then as those trees get some size to them, then they kind of deter that type of activity as well. But that's very good to know. Thank you.
Hey, Bert, this is Greg. If people see that issue, if they could just call 311, that'll go to our on-call manager. So till we get some upgrades, we can at least go address it immediately.
So in the short term, if we call 311 and just let them know that people are jumping the curb at Devonshire Park, we'll get somebody out there. Thank you, Greg. And that was Greg Clemmer. He's the division director for park operations at
I've got a question. This is Thomas Lee. If you do that, then are you gonna, if you have a lot of folk attending the park, some can park along the side of the street, but then where would additional parking take place? Because that's the issue with the people parking on the park property.
I got you. Yeah, typically, Thomas, on our neighborhood and our local parks, we don't provide parking areas. In this park particular, it's such a small park, we wouldn't really have room to do that. And so with the adjacent road being wider and there is room to park on the side, a lot of the folks typically that use these types of parks are kind of they're walking to the park rather than parking there.
And the people in the neighborhood.
So what we may do, particularly if we have some kind of an event or something like that in the park, is see if there's an opportunity to work with CMS, particularly if we're able to extend a trail kind of back in the woods there, where we might be able to use some of the parking that they have on their schools.
Devonshire.
Yeah, either in the evenings or on the weekends, and utilize some of that rather than building more parking spaces within the park there. That's a good point, though. Thank you.
Any other ideas for the park? And I guess this is where, we said one thing earlier, but we're all open for your full list of a wish list for the park amenities too.
Tammy Simmons, where is this extra lane coming from that all of these improvements are going to be from?
So the majority of the improvements would take place in the land that we have now. within the park proper. If we wanted to do a larger loop trail, then what we would need to do is work with CMS, who owns the adjacent property kind of behind the park, back where the old shelter used to be, and do some clearing of underbrush and things. So you have open sight lines within that area and potentially activate some of that. We could do a smaller loop within the park, but you'd have to go around it like 12 or 15 times in order to walk a mile, and you might get busy walking in that tight of a circle. So if we have an opportunity,
But you've got Devonshire School right next door.
That's right. Yeah, you're
and
correct.
So you could stretch the park out, if you will, to include that if you won't be trespassing, or if you will, onto that property, because I know there are restrictions as it relates to CMS properties at certain times.
That's right. And so if we kept it, fairly close to the park, and it's just kind of within that wooded area, then it may be no issue with CMS, but we'll definitely have a conversation with them. I have a coordination meeting with CMS staff on a monthly basis, and so we'll make sure that we talk about this in our meeting next week.
But certainly, if you focused on that, I'm just focused on that creek. If that creek were cleared and cleaned, and you could actually complement the park with it by putting benches along there, and just allow that creek to complement that park in a real nice way.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Let's see, what was Wayne saying there? Yep, he was mentioning about the creek there as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the left side has kind of a ditch coming through it under the road as well. It's not a full-size creek like there is on the right, but
exactly,
it does bring some water down, and I think that water actually may originate in my neighborhood. But when it's dry, but it usually has a little bit of water in it.
Yep.
Right.
So crossing it at the back, you have to be pretty far back to be able to.
Right, and that stream runs. That stream runs along Milton Road Apartments, and then it goes across Milton Road on over, I believe, in the Shannon Park neighborhood as well.
Okay.
I don't know what the name of that creek is, or if it's a tributary of another creek.
I'm going to see if I can find the name very quickly.
Briar.
It's a Briar Trib.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I
Thank
figured.
you.
That's what I
Thank
figured.
you. And someone was mentioning the ditch that kind of runs right through the park there as well. That's correct. So if we are able to extend a trail kind of into the CMS property there, then we'll make sure that we have
put a nice
crossing
bridge over that.
That's
put
right.
a nice bridge, nice arch bridge over that would really be nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and typically when we do trails like that, we like to pave them. It does cost a little bit more money up front, but it actually reduces maintenance costs for us long term.
In the long run.
That's right. Yeah. And then it's open, and anybody of people of all abilities are able to go and utilize that too and take advantage of it. Okay. All right. Well, let's Katie, if you want to save that screen, save that, and then we'll go on. We'll talk a little bit about the project schedule. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end of the meeting. If folks have any additional questions or ideas, we're available up until 7 o'clock tonight. So today was our initial input meeting, and this is a project that we want to get moving as quickly as possible. And we think we have the ability to do that. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to take the ideas that we talked about tonight and the input that we received through our public input website and start to come up with a concept that will show the elements that are within the park now, and then the elements that we want to add to the park. And we plan on being out in the park on January 28th. So not, wait, is the 28th, is that Saturday, Friday or Saturday? That's Friday.
Yeah, we're gonna post the for initial concept to the public input page by then.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And so we'll post the concept on the page next week and start to get some final or some additional feedback on that. And then with some additional feedback, we'll move into kind of our final design and sharing that plan in the spring. So I would say probably middle to end of March or so. And then our hope is to start construction very, very quickly. So some of the things that we talked about tonight, some of the clearing of underbrush and things like that, we can get and we can go out and do very, very quickly. Some of the other items, if we're adding shelters or fitness equipment, there's a little bit of a lag time between ordering that, receiving it, and being able to go out and actually build that on site. So that might take a little bit longer. But our hope is to start that construction in late spring or early summer and have everything wrapped up and completed by this fall.
Make sure they have plenty of lighting out there too.
Thank you. Plenty of lighting. And I think, I believe someone else mentioned in the chat, adequate lighting in the park and then on the trail as well. We typically don't add lights to parks. We'll have to look and see what kind of lighting we have along the road here. But we continue to get more and more requests for lighting in parks. So we'll absolutely take that under advisement for this one. See, Dornika, if you'd go to the next slide. I just wanted to show very quickly the contact information. So myself, Bert Lynn there, Darnika, who is overseeing this project, and then Katie Lloyd, who's helping with all of our equity park projects. Feel free to reach out and talk to us. Our information is also on the publicinput.com/Devonshire website. If you have any neighbors, friends, or family who weren't able to join us tonight, we're actually going to post the recording of tonight's meeting on the website as well. So everyone can get caught back up and be a part of the project. So
I provided my mail, email, and phone info.
Okay.
I was notified by one of my neighbors earlier today, and I don't think I got a card, postcard or anything, but
okay.
You know,
all right. We'll make sure to get you on the list. Thank you for letting us know.
Thank you. Thank you, Bert.
Could I ask one question?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I just, and this is sort of off the subject, but because I've lived in this neighborhood so long and it's a lot of changes going on, I wanted to know, is this park and all of these improvements going to affect our property taxes down the road?
Great question.
This park will not affect your property taxes. The money that we're using now is money that's already been received through property taxes and other funding sources. So typically those decisions are left up to our elected officials or Board of County Commissioners. But the money that we're using is not future dollars. It's not bond dollars. It's
already allocated funds.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I got a question for you, Bert.
Yes.
You may not know this right now, but this Build Back Better law that's just been signed by the president, I know each state is going to probably be getting billions of dollars, and that'll probably trickle down to even our city. But you probably, you probably can't answer that question. It's too early in the game.
I can answer that question.
You can?
As part of that, there was the American Recovery Plan Act. We call it ARPA because we have to shorten, we have to abbreviate everything in government for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So the county, Mecklenburg County, City of Charlotte, and CMS did receive some funding from that. And we're going through a process right now of identifying potential ways to spend that money.
Okay.
There are a few things that we can do through Park and Recreation that would spend that money. However, there are some strings attached in terms of when you start that project, when you spend that money by. That
Right.
money cannot be used, and I just found this out this morning in a meeting that I had with the county manager's office. That money can't be used for projects that you've already allocated funding for.
Right.
So we wouldn't be able to use
Understood.
that money for this
That's double,
project.
that'll be like double dipping.
Correct. So we are identifying some additional projects, some of which we saw on the slide earlier that were those poorly rated parks, using those funds to go in and reinvest in our poorly rated parks and potentially building new parks. All right. Let's see. I don't know if we had any other questions come in through the chat. I don't see any new questions. Thomas left his information. Okay. All right. So with that, I think, it's an open forum. If you've got any more questions or any more ideas that have come to mind, if not, feel free to send us an email, give us a phone call, or jump back on the website and put those ideas in there. Like I said earlier, we're going to start next week using this information and start generating some ideas for the parks and see how everything lays out. And then we'll start to share that by the end of next week.
What did you need the contact info for again?
Thomas left his contact information because he did not receive a postcard in the mail. So
Oh,
he wanted to make sure he was on the mailing list. If you signed up for the meeting tonight, I believe we asked for a little bit of contact information, name, maybe zip code and email address. So we'll be able to send you updates using that information that you've already provided to us.
okay. Yeah, it appears a lot of people didn't get postcards because they're not here.
We
That's a joke, Bert. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. But yeah, I mean, so what, and we're kind of noticing that a little bit is we're sending postcards out between a quarter mile and a half mile beyond
The park.
parks like Devonshire Park. And so we're sending out hundreds of postcards, and we don't know if people are just kind of getting them and throwing them away or what's going on. So we're looking for some better ways to get the word out about meetings just like this.
Did the card have a QR code on it so somebody could scan it and click in and leave their information? I don't
Yes.
use the QR device, but I don't remember.
Wayne, that's a great question. And yes, there was a QR code on the postcard that sent you to our Reinvest public input page that showed kind of some of the websites for those 10 equity projects we're going to be investing in. So if you were to scroll down just a little bit, Devonshire Park was on that webpage.
Okay. So you made it as easy as you could.
That was the attempt.
Yep.
I may have gotten it and just overlooked it.
Yeah. It wasn't a bill and it wasn't money. So
Absolutely. You got it.
We try to
If
make
it
them
had-
attractive.
If it had been a bill, it wouldn't have, I'd have thrown it away too.
yeah, the other place where I get stuff that I do pay attention to is in with the water bill.
Mhm.
The little things in there that have to
Yeah,
do with
that little
recycling
news blurb.
and don't put grease down the drain and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Those are helpful in there.
Okay,
Be
that's
nice.
good feedback.
Yeah, that'd be a nice place to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Let's see. Thomas, I don't know if you're reading the chat or not.
Oh, stop smoking. Oh, no, okay.
No, I didn't say that.
I'm home and I forgot that let me put myself on
Well, you're not in the park. Yeah, our parks and our recreation centers are smoke free.
Yeah,
But you're technically not there. So
yeah, I know.
all right. Well, I appreciate everybody's input tonight. I think this was a great first step. And we'll take this information. We've already gotten some information from the website. And we're excited to get started and find some ways to go in and further improve Devonshire Park. So if you've got anything else, feel free to speak up. We'll stay on here for a few more minutes. If not, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day at the end of the day. And we look forward to hearing from you and ultimately seeing you here at the park, hopefully sooner rather than later. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Bert. Take care.
You too. Thanks, Tom.